This week in games, Phil Spencer talks reviving old IPs, Pete Hines retires from Bethesda, and Sony provides humanitarian aid to Israel and Gaza. Also, our review of Lords of the Fallen. This is the Two Penny Gamescast. What's poppin', players? Welcome back to the Two Penny Gamescast, episode 170. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and co-host. Say hello to the people, Connor Elliott.
And roommate, because I can hear you talking when you start the show, when you're like, what's going on, gamers? And then
I think part of that, I don't think I have my door closed, because, ladies and gentlemen, our AC is out. So it is a cool 78 degrees, almost 80 degrees. It feels like 80 degrees in here all the time. Definitely when I have my computer or my PlayStation running, it feels like 100 degrees in this fucking room, let me tell you what. And it's been feeling that way all weekend. Because, Connor, I've been playing Spider-Man 2.
I didn't notice from all the yelling. You were animated, to say the least, while playing Spider-Man.
For sure. Oh, man, Spider-Man 2 has been a fantastic time. I did roll credits over the weekend, and you can see the opening couple of hours live on the channel right now over at youtube.com/@2pennygames, where I reviewed... I played the first couple of hours live on Twitch, and then I played some of the late game stuff live on Twitch. Mr. Re_K was in the chat with me all weekend long. Thank you for that, buddy. Yes, he was also playing in the background. And, yeah, we're just having a good time playing Spider-Man. I'm not ready to review it yet. I still want to go dive into a bunch of the side content and stuff before I start talking about my overall opinions of the game itself. But you can check that out. You can also check out an unboxing of the Spider-Man 2 Collector's Edition, which I have. I got myself 19 inches of Venom, which you can see right there in the background right there. Venom. Very exciting stuff. He's a big boy. Venom. He's a big, hefty boy. Venom.
I actually didn't see it.
Venom. You haven't seen him?
I have not, no. Because you were, when I left the day you got it, I couldn't see what was in the box yet.
Okay.
I just knew there was 18 inches of Venom.
Nice.
That's all I know.
19. 19.
Better.
Gotta be specific. There you go. Well, you gotta come check it out at some point. Not right now. We're running a show. What is this show, ladies and gentlemen? This is the Two Penny Gamescast, where every week, me and Connor, we sit down with you and we give you the new news concerning the video game industry. We each come to you with two topics, two pennies, if you will, and we give you our 2 cents on them. Also, stay tuned for the end of this episode, where Connor will be giving us his review of Lords of the Fallen. He's been playing it in the background, and boy, oh boy, I'm excited to hear what he has to say, because we've had some off-camera conversations that were quite interesting, weren't they?
They were interesting, but they'll be more interesting here on the podcast, because that's what we've been waiting for.
That's what we've been waiting for.
Of reviews. Yes, on this show.
Very exciting. So make sure you stick around for that, or you can just catch out the breakout video over at youtube.com/@2pennygames. You, of course, can get this show every week, Monday, 2 p.m. Central, not 2 p.m., 8 p.m. Central, You can get this show every Monday, 8 a.m. Central Time, youtube.com/@2pennygames, or mainstream podcast services of your choice. And you can also, I don't know where I was going with that. So I'm out of practice, man. I didn't do this show last week, and I'm usually just off the top of the head, and I always feel like I have something to say. There's so much content going live on the channel right now that I'm lost in the matrix. I don't know what's what anymore. You can check out the new episode of The Piggy Bank, which went live this last Saturday at 8 a.m. Central Time, youtube.com/@2pennygames, and also on mainstream podcast services of your choice. That was a very exciting episode in which we discussed top 10 superhero video games of all time. We're very on brand this week for the release of Spider-Man 2. Coming soon to the channel, also, these will be breakout videos on the YouTube channel. They will not be coming to podcast services. Will be reviews for the Metal Gear Solid Masters Collection Volume 1, Super Mario Wonder, and, of course, next week, probably attached to next week's podcast, there will be a review for Spider-Man 2. Make sure you subscribe, like, and follow, and share, and hit that bell, all of the notifications to keep up to date for those videos. Connor, enough drabble, enough conversation. We got to get into it, my boy, and we got to start off with story number 1. Here we go. In case you live under a rock, ladies and gentlemen, there's some real heavy stuff happening in the world today, and a lot of really painful, tragic events have taken place over the last couple of weeks in real life news. This is a video game podcast, but as always, we do say, hey, video games at the end of the day are toys, and we do put the toys to the side. And it just so happens to be a very important week in which we must make conversation for some real life news that is happening that are affecting millions of people right now. So, Connor, take it away with story number 1 for me.
Well, right here, we're going off a VGC article from Tom Ivan. Sony has donated $2 million towards humanitarian aid in Israel and Gaza. It's the PlayStation parent company. Sony has donated $2 million. So ignore that. Sony said it had donated the money to the Japanese Red Cross Society and the United Nations Children's Fund. Additionally, it said various Sony group companies are running programs matching donations made by employees to nonprofit organizations. Devolver Digital has also made an unspecified donation to support Palestinians impacted by the current hostilities. Quote, we've donated to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, who are providing humanitarian aid to the Palestinian families. We ask you to consider donating if you're able, the publisher said. On Thursday, U.S. President Joe Biden said a deal had been struck with Egypt to allow the delivery of limited aid into the neighboring Palestinian territory of Gaza. People there are in urgent need of essentials like food, water, fuel, and medicine after Israel launched a blockade of Gaza 11 days ago. The move was made in response to a Palestinian militant group, Hamas, killing 1,400 people in an incursion from Gaza on October 7th. Gaza has since been devastated by a series of Israeli airstrikes that have reportedly killed over 3,000 people, and Israel is currently preparing to launch a ground assault. With a similar $2 million donation, Sony was one of many companies in the gaming industry that donated towards humanitarian aid efforts in Ukraine following Russia's invasion of the country last year. Now, I've been following this conflict very closely these past couple weeks, which, as was stated, it started when the militant group Hamas, who launched attack on Israeli settlers in the Gaza, controlled by Israel. It's been described as an open-air prison by people who have visited there, by humanitarian groups, and it's a place where the Palestinians who live there are only allowed in that small area, which is, I think it's like 2 times the size of Washington, D.C., it's not a very big place. And they are constantly harassed by the IDF, which is the Israeli military force. And now, as a result of that, Hamas, which is a terror group, decided to go and attack innocent civilians, which has now caused this entire debacle to spiral out of control. And something that some people need to realize, because some people don't follow this as much as I've been following it, and I'm not an expert on these kinds of on the Israeli and Palestine situation, going all the way back to the creation of the Israel state. So I'm not going to try and bother and acting like I do know. But what I definitely know is that there has been a confliction that Palestinians in general are Hamas, which is completely ridiculous, completely false. It is most certainly not a majority, as much as some people like the IDF might try to act like they're culpable in their conducting of terrorist actions, which Hamas is a terrorist organization, but the IDF isn't so much better. Now that they've bombed the area, which, like I said, is very small and has killed an untold number of civilians. Not just, they have, of course, have killed Hamas fighters, but primarily civilians. I think half the population of the 2 million people in Gaza are children, and they have made up a large portion of the death count. And I say this because some people instantly, who are so disconnected from the Israeli-Palestine issue, believe that Palestinians are these people who are extremely oppressive. They are religious fundamentalists that don't allow any kind of a quarter for homosexuality, for any kind of differing opinions. Which, while Hamas might be like that, the Palestinian people are not. The other thing that people have been saying is that recently Hamas was elected into power back in 2006, which has been used to justify some of these horrible actions against civilians. And I should note that that occurred, like I said, in 2006, but there has not been an election since then due to the Israeli forces preventing any from happening beyond that. I believe about half the people in Gaza right now didn't even vote for them. And it was a reaction, once again, to Israeli occupation, which has existed there for people's entire lives, and usually results in families being pushed out of these homes they've lived in for many years to make room for settlers from places like Brooklyn, from the United States primarily, to move in and take their homes from them. It's very much a multifaceted situation, but to bring it back to the Sony donating $2 million in humanitarian aid, it's good to see they're not differentiating between Israel or Gaza Palestinians, because you have seen a lot of people, like I said, dehumanize Palestinians and use that as an attempt to prop up Israel as the definitive good guys in this situation, where even though they clearly have had losses of life, and innocent losses of life, I should stress, Palestinians have had more so in terms of just numbers. But either way, it's good to see that a company has, at least bothered to try and help the people who are suffering, which, like I said, is not primarily Hamas terrorists or IDF soldiers, but normal people who have been severely affected by this. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And this, while it is a good thing to do, it ultimately won't really have much effect on the conflict as a whole. Though people will be saved from this, because water has been cut off, power has been cut off by the Israelis, which is a war crime. And now people, like I said, innocent people, are suffering as a result of it.
Yeah, well, Connor, you nailed it from my perspective. You are more informed on the situation than I am, but I've been tangentially following the situation as it's been progressing over the last week or two, and though I have some differing perspective on it than you, for the most part, I echo the same sentiments as you. And my focus here is just on the loss of innocent life that is happening over there, and it's really quite tragic to see. It hurts to see. You're seeing these children lose their families at such a young age, and now we have to sit back and watch as the world stage reacts to this, and very few, I feel, have had a good or a well thought out or proper response to this, but. In terms of this news and how it affects our industry, it doesn't affect our industry too much, but it is good to see the support happen from the big dogs out here, the Sonys, the Devolver Digitals, and so forth. The humanitarian aid is absolutely the focus here, and this will save lives. It's a drop in the bucket, but it
every little bit helps.
It has to be. Every little bit helps. That's the better way to put it. But I thought I saw Biden put in a huge, I want to say it was $100 billion something for.
It was probably for Israel.
Biden put in a $100 billion request to Congress for Israel, Ukraine, Gaza aid. And
I should mention, sorry to detract from possibly your point. It was actually said recently that I believe it was in regards to the allowing of humanitarian aid into Gaza that was pushed for by the United States, who has been funding Israel with arms and weapons for years and years now, with taxpayer dollars. But there was a spokesperson or someone in the Israeli government who was saying that they couldn't really say no due to the fact that we helped bankroll them. Which, all that is to say that in our country, the United States, has a position in this conflict to be able to force a deal to come to fruition by withholding these things from Israel. But unfortunately, we've effectively just seen wholesale support for Israel. Any kind of anything that they've done bad, most recently, unconfirmed as we don't know who did it exactly, bombing of a hospital, which has claimed many, many lives over in the Gaza area. There are some people who say that the IDF launched a missile that failed and launched the hospital. Some people are saying that Hamas, same thing happened with them. Both sides have, of course, taken their own stance on it. Israel providing supposed evidence, audio files of Hamas fighters discussing it, though they have lied in the past. Particularly, there was a Palestinian journalist that was shot in a non-combat area, and after it was done, the Israeli government denied that any soldier of theirs did so. But months later, I believe it was 4 months afterwards, they came out and said it was an IDF soldier that did it. It wasn't on their orders, supposedly, which I don't find very unsurprising. Someone could have just gone off the reservation, but they have lied in the past. And Hamas, being a terrorist organization, has also lied in the past and have doctored things that never really happened. So until an external investigation is done on things like that, it's kind of hard to say what's going, whose fault is actually, who's actually to blame. But going back to my main point, the United States can try and put a stop on this whole entire conflict, and they, as of right now, are choosing not to, and probably will not.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of the conflict itself, I don't think you need another white American man to tell y'all how to feel on this. There are other voices in the space that you should be listening to. And so I urge you to go out and reach out for those and find something new to consider and all of that. In terms of this and in terms of video games, this is a great look for these publishers, and the humanitarian aid should be their focus as multinational corporations.
That's all they need to do. Just,
yeah.
They have the money, and they can put it towards the people that are affected by it, which they thankfully are doing.
Yep. Moving on to our second topic of the day, not necessarily a cheery one after that either, but one just also important to bring up. Here we go. Connor, this is your second penny of the day as well, right? Your second topic. Here we go. Take it away with this one as well, brother.
This is a Eurogame article. Roblox tells most employees to return to the office part-time or take a severance package. This is by Liv Nan. Roblox is mandating most remote employees return to office working 3 days a week or take a severance package. Employees were notified on the change yesterday. Roblox CEO David Bozuki said in an open letter to staff, quote, affected employees have been given 3 months until, this is not a quote, by the way, my apologies. Affected employees have been given 3 months until 16th of January 2024 to decide whether they wish to stay at Roblox. Those who do relocate are being asked to work from Roblox's office in San Mateo, California by the 15th of July 2024. Bazuki told employees that the company will assist with relocation costs. Bazuki chalked the change up to concerns about junior staff, quote, who typically learn through social contact and would miss out on senior mentorship, end quote. If the company continues to work 100% remotely, Roblox adopted... if the company continues to work 100% remotely, Roblox adopted remote working once pandemic lockdowns begin, but ultimately, Roblox is an innovation company, Bazuki said in his letter. And we needed to get back to working in person. Employees whose role required them to work remotely, such as those at data centers or call centers, and, quote, individuals who have niche skills or significant institutional knowledge, end quote, won't be asked to return to the office. For those who choose to leave Roblox, they'll get a period of 3 months until April 15th, 2024 to transition out of their roles as full-time employees. Severance packages will be determined by, quote, individual level and term of service, along with 6 months of healthcare coverage, end quote. The company said its priority is supporting remote employees in their decision whilst also ensuring teams, quote, have what they need to continue to meet our aggressive goals for next year, end quote. Last month, Roblox laid off 30 staff from its talent acquisition team, shortly after the company launched a virtual company career center in Roblox itself, with the intention of interviewing candidates with the virtual experience. Well, we haven't heard this. This isn't the first time we've heard about there being issues with people relocating back to offices from remote work after the pandemic happened. And it's always ridiculous whenever I see these people say that they need to relocate, because you're talking about those who went on to a job thinking that it was going to be remote, who could be in a completely different part of the country, now being asked to move to San Mateo for 3 days a week to work on a game that, we've seen it. It's been done in the pandemic, and it can be done after the pandemic, all at home. And yet, clearly, there's this really strange desire by these companies, not even just in the gaming sphere, to want people to work in offices, such as a senior mentorship, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Tavin, can't that be done online as well?
It can 100% be done online as well.
Yes.
No, it's absolutely just about corporate control, being able to control what people do, how they spend their time, and make sure to have a closer eye on them and manipulate them in different ways. All of this returning to office bullshit is exactly that. It's bullshit. I'm sure there are benefits to working in an office and having the social connection with them all, especially in the games industry, where the art form is so collaborative and so open to like working with each other on a main floor. They're all in little tiny cubicles, and they're all on like a dev floor together. However, we've seen great success from many pandemic games, games that changed the industry, or games that showed out and were very, very impressive to the industry. All within the last couple of years. You're looking at, your God of War Ragnaroks. You're looking at your Spider-Mans. You're looking at Elden Ring. Those are spent the last leg of their development, at least, in pandemic. Fortnite has thrived over the pandemic. A bunch of other games have thrived over the pandemic. And now, granted, we are seeing a shortage of success now, post-pandemic, but that was kind of to be expected. And because of that, we're facing mass layoffs because all of these CEO heads don't know how to, implement policies in a safe way that doesn't cost people their jobs. And this is just another example of like, all right, you guys are trying to return to a normal that doesn't exist anymore, and it sucks, man. A lot of people made life decisions over the last 3-4 years because of the pandemic, and an expectation that things could continue over the internet and over work from home status and so forth. And so yeah, you're seeing just a mass push and pull industry wide, and not just in gaming but in worldwide business as well. So this is unfortunately another example of this. I think it's all bullshit, but if you're gonna do it, at least Roblox seems to be doing it in an okay manner. I mean, we're helping people transition out. We're giving them time to figure out how to get it done. We've got 3-4 months before 3 or 4 months to make accommodations where necessary. So all of that's really nice, but at the same time, it's like, well, you could have just not done this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, at least it's something. At least there is a severance package. It's not just, go fuck yourself. And it's not a strong go fuck yourself. It's a kind one.
It's a soft one. It's a very soft go fuck yourself. I mean, even like last month, Roblox laid off 30 staff from its talent acquisition team shortly after the company launched a virtual company career center in Roblox. So like, you were using your own platform to develop a work from home style ecosystem, and now you're just kind of throwing it all away. Now, maybe there's some big wigs back there that are saying, hey, this is not working for us. We need to come back. But I mean, the game has been launched. You know what Roblox is. You know how to develop it and support it. It's been a huge success for many years, and there's no reason that you can't adapt with the times, in my humble opinion, as someone who's just observing from the outside. But if you can't figure out how to adapt, I now question leadership, because there's been plenty of other studios that have learned how to adapt.
Not these guys.
Not these guys. Connor, moving on to our third topic of the day. It's time to salute an industry veteran, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a continuation and a long line of industry veterans that have kind of bowed out. We're seeing a generation of game developers or producers or industry heads sort of bow out. It's been a this generation of sort of that 2000s era. The ones who developed the games that Connor, you and I grew up on, have all sort of either quietly or just subtly been bowing out. And I think this is one of the more subtle ones. Here we go. This was a news report from Bethesda Monday. This was the same time that Spider-Man 2 reviews were going live. There was some other news industry stuff going on. And then Bethesda kind of just threw this up, and Pete Hines is leaving Bethesda. Pete Hines, SVP, head of publishing for Bethesda Softworks, has announced his decision to retire. Pete's public presence was only a small part of his role at Bethesda. Although the way he represented us carried over into the values he nurtured here, authenticity, integrity, and passion, his contributions have been integral in building Bethesda and its family of studios into the world-class organization that it is today. His vision helped push us forward, and his hard work inspired us. We're thankful for his 24 years of leadership and wish him the best in this next chapter. We'll miss you, Pete. That's from Bethesda itself. And I remember Pete Hines first came into my sort of like I first recognized him from some of those early E3 stages when Bethesda was first starting out on E3 and they weren't, tied to anybody else, and they were really trying to establish themselves as a mainliner in the industry. I remember him on the same stage that Doom 2 was announced, or Doom Eternal, as we know it now, where Dishonored 2 was announced, and all of these things. And I think Pete really helped garner a huge amount of talent over with the Bethesda Games studios. You look at your Arcanes, you look at your id Softwares, you look at your machine gun games, and so forth. And I think Pete was a huge influence in the success in a lot of those games, and sort of the culture of the smaller Bethesda studios, it's sad to see him go, because he was a very welcoming presence. I always liked seeing him in presentations and so forth, and he's a voice and a face that I always look at as someone who's one of us, or at least someone who's got gamers' interests at heart, and under his eye, there was a lot of great games from my teenage years that released. You're looking at, your Doom 2016s and your Dishonoreds, as I've already mentioned, but it was just Elder Scrolls Online. He was always, up there telling us stuff of what was going on in Elder Scrolls Online, even though I wasn't, always the guy playing that game. But, he really helped, I think, diversify and establish what the name of Bethesda meant outside of your Fallouts and outside of your Elder Scrolls and so forth. And he'll be sorely missed.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with going back to some IPs that he had been involved with in the past, particularly the Fallout games, because we're not going to see one of those for quite some time now. Starfield just recently came out, and Elder Scrolls is clearly up on the docket. And beyond that, it makes sense for them to go back to the Fallout universe, because by then they'd have been away from it for quite some time. And I'm interesting to see how that, plus Elder Scrolls, actually as well, are going to, how they're going to be with him going. Because I don't know, it's kind of hard on our side of things to tell how much.
Well, Connor, he's not Bethesda Game Softworks guy. He's the Bethesda publishing head. So he's not working so much on actual games. He's the guy who's like working with the devs to get their games out and so forth. Yeah.
It's just interesting to know, like, if we see any changes from him leaving, or if he did just perform the function of, fuck, you just told me and I forgot it again. I've read it, publishing for those kinds of games. I'm not very, as we've said a lot of times on this podcast, we're not the guys who know the super ins and outs of the industry. And so, contributions from people like Pete Hines are kind of lost on someone, especially like me. And that's not to say that he wasn't important. Clearly he was. I'm just interested to see how Bethesda will develop now that we're seeing some of the older staff go out.
Yeah, and I think it's just a change of eras. We're in a very different era right now, especially in the PS5 and Xbox Series generation, where some of those tried and true studios, are MIA, or they're not putting out their best work, or we're just in an era of different dogs coming up on top right now. With the release of Spider-Man 2, it's clear to me right now that Insomniac is PlayStation's best studio at the moment. But we're just sitting here waiting for the Naughty Dogs to show up. God of War Ragnarok was just a huge success off of Santa Monica Studios. But these games take so long to come out, and they nowadays, to where it's like, man, Insomniac, which was prior to Spider-Man, in my mind, always an underdog studio, to see them come out and not only be putting out high quality games, but at a prolific rate, has been awesome to see. And now we look at, to center it back onto the Bethesda studios, you look at, Arcane is in a weird place right now, where on one hand, they are developing really, really cool and really interesting and Game of the Year contenders in games like Deathloop, but then they're also putting out, some flops, like, what was that one that came out this year? Redfall, where you're like, man, that's not exactly what we want from Arcane Studios. And then you look around at, you're curious at what id's doing and what Machine Gun Games is doing, and we're just kind of waiting for these titles to come through. And I think now, as Xbox has acquired Bethesda and is sort of taking over that publishing front, I think this is a great time for Pete Hines, if he wants to bow out. You know, I saw a lot of conversation happening online and stuff that Pete Hines is really a family man. He would so much rather be at home with his family than out. You know, when you're at such a high place in a company like this, you're doing a lot of travel. You know, you're going all around the world to talk to your worldwide studios and to help them develop and sort of prosper in their ideas that they want to do. And so for Pete to come out and say, hey, you know, 24 years under my belt, not necessarily old guard by any means, but, you know, he's done his time. He's served his bid. For him to be like, I'm cool. I'm going to go dip. Now, will he be back in the industry at some point? I could see that being a future for him where he, you know, is in a less public-facing role or something, and maybe he's more behind the scenes in some way. And, you know, sometimes guys just need a break, and maybe Pete is taking that and you know, in his mind, he's like, nah, I'm cool. I can retire off of this. Or, you know, maybe he'll be back in a couple of years or so forth. You never know. So, but overall, salute to Pete Hines. Thank you for your contributions, and you will be missed. Bada boom, just like that. Connor, moving on to our final topic of the day, right before we get into your Lords of the Fallen review, let's talk about Phil Spencer wanting to bring back all these old IPs of the past. Ooh. So we are pulling from an IGN article by Rebecca Valentine. Phil Spencer, quote, all in on Xbox Studios revisiting older owned IP. Phil Spencer really, really wants someone within Xbox Game Studios to make a new Hexen game. Excuse me. First, he wore that Hexen t-shirt at the Xbox Game Showcase earlier this year. And now he's name-dropping Hexen repeatedly as a franchise he wants someone within Xbox to revisit somehow. But Spencer notes only if the team doing so is genuinely passionate about it, or whatever other older franchise they're plucking from Xbox's catalog to refresh. Speaking on the official Xbox podcast, Spencer spoke on the company's strategy for how it allocates its own catalog of IPs to its development studios, reassuring that Xbox isn't out there compelling anyone to revive older franchises they aren't interested in. He said he frequently meets with Xbox teams to learn what they're passionate about and is happy to let them dig into the Xbox vault for franchises they're personally interested in. Quote, I just don't think that a team working on something that isn't their passion leads to the best results, Spencer said. Quote, so I might have my list of things from my memories and history that I want to see made again. Everybody will. When I just think about, not just about Activision Blizzard King, you add in Bethesda, you add in Xbox's history, Rare. The amount of franchises that we now have in our portfolio is kind of inspiring. It's daunting. I feel that we have to be a great custodian for the content that we touch. These are memories for people on different platforms, different decades, and I want to make sure that when we're going back and visiting something that we do it with our complete ability. A motivated team that wants to go to work on something and make a difference, not just create something for financial gain or create something for a PR announcement and not deliver. Spencer continued calling out Game Pass as a useful way to revisit franchises that might deserve a little love, but might not necessarily warrant something more intensive. And he admitted he thinks that while Xbox has done, quote, an okay job looking back on its older franchises, it hasn't, quote, done an A-plus job, and he hopes to rectify that in the future, both through Game Pass and through full-blown new projects. This isn't the first time Spencer spoke on the subject either. In fact, the Xbox head seems extremely keen to encourage studios to dig through the Xbox vault for gold, especially if that gold is 1995 Raven Software FPS Hexen, which Xbox now owns. Quote, if teams want to go back and revisit some of the things that we have and do a full focus on it, I'm going to be all in on that. He reiterated during the podcast today in the same interview, he also reiterated 100% parity for Call of Duty across all platforms and explained why there weren't any major Activision games on Game Pass just yet, now that the acquisition has officially closed. What else might Spencer and Cohen... Okay, that's some other stuff. But that is where we're at. Connor, Phil Spencer wants the old to be new again if the teams are down for it. He's not forcing it upon them. He's not making them do a style of game that they don't want to do or dig into an IP that they have no passion for. He says, hey man, that doesn't lead to the best results. And I agree with him full-heartedly. This is what we've been saying for years now. We look around at all these studios and all these great dev teams that are doing what feels like being pigeonholed into games that aren't their style. Why is Naughty Dog making a multiplayer-only game? That doesn't make 100% sense. That doesn't make 100% sense to me. But it does make sense for Naughty Dog to play around with multiplayer. They've done some multiplayer stuff in the past. You look at PlayStation Studios as a whole. A lot of their games are seemingly going to a games-as-service model. PlayStation has built its brand upon single-player action-adventure franchises. And so while I'm cool with a dev studio being excited, being passionate, and wanting to experiment with something new, I also don't want them to be forced into something that they don't care about or have no expertise in, because it will lead them down a path of failure more times than not. We have seen this to be true. It doesn't always happen. Very often we see crazy success stories. You look at Guerrilla Games, which was a first-person shooter studio. Now they are one of the leading charges in some of the best open-world RPG-esque games with Horizon. Horizon, even though you and I, it's not our favorite franchise, Connor, is a great franchise and a great IP, and has been very impressive to see what Guerrilla did with Killzone to fully transition over and do this entirely other game design style, and it worked out for them in spades. And so I this tells me, as always, that Phil Spencer cares more about the art of video games. He cares more about the gamer. He cares more about the health of his dev studios than profit, which, awesome. That's so freaking great. Now, don't get me wrong. Xbox is a huge business, and business does need to happen. So they will, take part in, maybe some schemy stuff here and there. But for the most part, I've always said it, man. Xbox is consumer friendly first, and this just seems to be an even clearer example of that. And some of the things that Phil Spencer's hinting at or saying in this interview excite me deeply, because now that they have fully acquired Activision Blizzard King, there's a lot of deep cuts in a lot of those vaults that I would really like to see come back in some form or another. Whether it's just a port to Game Pass and let it live on Game Pass for the rest of the time. A lot of those games would be great to see again and have access to.
I'm reminded of the stupid story we got 2021 of when they had remade Tony Hawk 1 and 2. It was Activision Blizzard at the time, before the deal with Microsoft went through, where it did super well, and clearly these people had joy and love for the game, and then they crushed it instantly by making them go work on assets for Blizzard games. Probably Overwatch was probably a big one that they went on to. World of Warcraft is always going on, so that one as well. And they just completely scrapped the other games that were going to be remade by this team that already did an amazing job. And now those people went from working a game they probably cared about, one of these older games, and are now just doing, the grunt work that is generally at these companies for these, games that just keep going on and on and on, like Overwatch and World of Warcraft.
To that same point, another Activision Blizzard studio, Toys for Bob, did great work with the Crash Bandicoot remakes, did great work with the Spyro Trilogy remake, and was acclaimed with Crash 4. A lot of people saying Crash 4 being the best of the franchise, and then immediately being shuttered, forced to work on Call of Duty. And it's like, bro, this is not where you are squandering this talent. And it's another pin in the cap where it feels like, okay, maybe with Phil Spencer at the head and not fuckface over there at Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick, maybe in a few years we can see a return to form for some of those smaller dev studios who were focused on a different type of game.
Yeah. And Vicarious Visions was the one that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. Since you can spout it off the top of your head, and I cannot. You're so much better than me.
I couldn't remember Vicarious. I'll be honest. I didn't know about Vicarious, but I remember Toys for Bob with the Crash stuff, and that was a heartbreaker for me, man, because though I'm not a big fan of Crash or Spyro, I enjoy those games for what they are, but they're not my favorite things in the world. That style of game speaks to me very deeply. I'm very much of that era of the 2D/3D platformer mascot character age. My guys are just Ratchet and Clank and the Sly Cooper guys. Those are my guys. But Crash, Spyro, Jack and Daxter, that whole era speaks very deeply to me as a gamer, and I very much hope to see that kind of come back, and hope to see. I would like to see Banjo-Kazooie come back. I was never a Banjo guy, but I think that one makes a lot of sense to bring back. And now that, studios who are experts in sort of these revivals, like Toys for Bob, like Vicarious and all this, hopefully they'll be able to get their hands on more Tony Hawk Pro Skater stuff, more Crash and Spyro stuff. Maybe they'll be able to revive Banjo-Kazooie in a really cool way, and so on and so forth. And that excites me more than anything. What this does put into question for me, though, is what is the initiative doing with Perfect Dark then? Is that a franchise that the initiative really wanted to do? This is a new studio under Xbox helm, and by all reports, that game's not going fantastically, and that's why we've got, I believe it's Crystal Dynamics. It's not Eidos Montreal, right? It's Crystal.
I believe so.
Working with them to kind of get that one off the ground and in development, and it sounds like they're having a really hard time getting Perfect Dark working over there. Maybe in another year, a re-announcement of it will come out and will shut me up. But I'm just sitting here and I'm questioning. I'm like, all right, well, did the initiative really want to do Perfect Dark, or was it just the IP that was under Xbox at the time that made the most sense to start working on? I don't know. We'll have to sit and wait. But Phil Spencer, I feel, has always been consistent in his attitude and his tone. So I assume Perfect Dark is what the initiative wanted to work on. And game development's just hard, and it's just not coming together the way they want to, and so they're trying to figure it out. I don't know. Those are also conversations that we as the public don't necessarily need to be privy to.
What game would be the most loved to be brought back? I wonder. Microsoft has a large catalog that hasn't been tapped into for many years.
Yeah, I think I'm not familiar with Hexen. Phil Spencer seems to be very up on Hexen. Yeah. Raven Software, which is now a Call of Duty studio, working on that one, or is now a Call of Duty studio, worked on that one rather. So maybe they could bring that back, and that'll be joyous for them. I don't know, man. There's a lot of stuff in their catalog that I think would be really interesting to bring back. The one that will get most people excited, I think it's probably one of the ones we've already named, whether it be more Crash, more Tony Hawk, more Banjo-Kazooie, or something like that. I don't know, but I'm as always, I'm constantly excited for Xbox's future and constantly disappointed by Xbox's present. So we're gonna have to wait and see. Connor, anything else you want to add on to this before we dip off to go do your Lords of the Fallen review?
No, I think we're good.
I think we're good as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll remind you that this has been the Two Penny Gamescast, your weekly news podcast focused on the video game industry. You can catch us live over at twitch.tv/2pennygames every Sunday at 4 p.m. I don't know what my obsession is with 2 p.m. today. Every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Time. Twitch.tv/2pennygames to watch us record all of our podcasts live. But if you're watching later on the YouTube, thank you so much. Don't go anywhere. Please stick around for our review of Lords of the Fallen. Something you're definitely going to want to be in tune with. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to that right now. What's poppin', players? Welcome back to a Two Penny Games review. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and lead reviewer, Connor Elliott. Say hello to the people, Connor.
Hello. I am here to review a game.
A game.
Called
You
Lords
are indeed
of the Fallen.
Indeed, yeah, the hottest game out right now, Lords of the Fallen. Everybody's talking about it, Connor. No one else is thinking about any other game out right now. It is 100% all focused on this game right here. Isn't that true?
No. That's not true at all. I hadn't seen many people talk about this game. It released about a week before Spider-Man, a
Yeah.
little bit less than a week, and I think exactly a week, maybe.
Yeah.
And even then, there still wasn't much conversation on this game, except for technical issues that plagued certain people.
Of course. But however, it did okay review wise, and we're here to give our own review of it. You have been playing it, I have not, but as your roommate, I've definitely gathered some of your thoughts on the game in mild conversation here. And as I'm looking at the B-roll footage here, I'm interested to continue talking about it. But Connor, go ahead with your review of Lords of the Fallen.
Yeah, so Lords of the Fallen is a fine game. It's obviously a Soulsborne copy. Though it's like many games that copy the formula that FromSoft has clearly defined these past couple of years, and do a little bit to shake things up. So as of right now, I'm sitting at 18.7 hours on record. Pretty disappointing from my perspective. I tried to get to 20, but I didn't. I failed to do that. And I don't think I really needed to, because it was a fine game, as I said. It is not a bad game. I remember seeing Eurogamer give this a 2 out of 5, and among the many mixed reviews, I saw a lot of 8s, 7s, some 6s, even some 9s from more of the fringe outlets. And so I was kind of like, oh, well, that's probably a bit too harsh. But from everything I've seen, they've probably been the most reasonable on it. So being a FromSoft copy...
The 2 out of 10?
2 out of 5.
Oh, 2 out of 5. Okay, gotcha.
Yes. It unfortunately... Well, let me start off with the good things about it. First of all, it plays well enough. It plays very much like Dark Souls. You have your roll, which works almost the exact same. The length of the roll, the quickness of the roll, it's like identical completely. The only thing that's slightly different, and this is a nitpick, is I felt like sometimes when I would dodge, it wouldn't go the direction I wanted it to, but that might just be my skill issue. But because for the most part, the dodge was the Dark Souls roll. Everybody knows. Combat functions very similarly to those Souls games. You have your great swords, or I think they're called great swords. Your long swords, your short swords. You got some daggers. You have axes. You have great axes, hammers, great hammers, and all of them have their moveset that's tied specifically to that weapon, with with heavy hammers, which I tried a little bit of, functioning to the same degree as heavy axes, which, if you're looking at the B-roll right now, is what I decided to go with. I went with the strength build, which the way that the leveling system worked out is that I didn't take part in the magical aspect of things, which would take the form in Radiance, one of your skills that would allow for basically faith-based stuff, healing, buffs, things of that nature, throwing light spears or bolts of light at people. Then you have Inferno, which allows people to do fire stuff and whatnot. And then Umbral, which allows you, it requires both those stats and kind of its own separate thing. Because in this game, what you have is, the most defining feature of it is you being something called a lamp bearer. It's a glowing blue lamp that if you hold it up, you can see into the land of the dead. Umbral. Umbral. Yeah, Axiom is the land of the living, and Umbral is the land of the dead. And what it allows you to do is some pretty interesting stuff. Where when you hold up the lamp, the world will be denoted with moths at certain points, and that indicates that there is something on the other side. That when you hold up your lamps, you can you can interact with the other world. Sometimes this comes in the form of being able to access bridges, which, as long as you're holding up that lamp in the world of Axiom, you can cross it with ease. To even sometimes little bits of lore information, which will come sometimes after you beat a boss, where aspect of them will stay behind, and then when you interact with it, you gain the potential to unlock boss weapons back at the hub base. Which, once again, it's a FromSoft game, has those hub base areas like a Firelink Shrine, like the Round Table Hold, things like that. The other interesting act that you can do with the lamp is go into the world of Umbral. Sometimes by choice, by just holding it up and pressing, in my case, square, or when you die. Because you kind of get a second chance of life at this game when you die in the world of Axiom, the land of the living, and then going into the land of the dead, which you can also, at certain points in the game, get out of using, these basically dried up husks to transport yourself back to the world of Axiom. So it kind of becomes this resource management system of surviving with the health that you have available to yourself. Health functions the exact same. You have, in my case, I got up to 5 of your, like, you basically have a cross that heals you for your health, and they replenish when you go to lamps, or at least the dead bodies of former lamp bearers, which serve as the bonfires of this game, where you can use it to upgrade your character, warp to other bonfires, rest to heal yourself up and whatnot. But going back to the lamp, you can go into this other world to more easily interact with these bridges, which, like I said, you have to usually hold it up when you're in the land of the living to cross over, when they're always just there when you're into the land of the dead. And you can interact with things that basically are chests in that world, which require you to basically use the lamp's power to draw out whatever item is in this, this weird desiccated husk of a person. Because the world building, or rather, I should say, the setting of Lords of the Fallen differs drastically when you go over into this really dark, macabre land of the dead. From the more grounded, of course, grounded as far as a fantasy game concerns, Axiom, which is where you're going to spend most parts of the game in. Because in the land of the Umbral, like I said, you can die and then get resurrected back there to continue to go on. It just extends your life a little bit longer. But in that world, an eye pops up on the side of your screen that, as the longer you spend in there, the more dangerous it gets. And the way this usually, comes in is there's kind of like a dried up bodies standing at random points, and sometimes they'll just disappear, but sometimes they'll turn into basically grunt enemies that will attack you. And then this levels up to like wraiths with deadly size, or weird gremlin-like creatures that crawl on the ground and chase after you. Yeah, it's very cool. It's the best part of the game because the transition is very seamless. Like I said, it has a nice stylistic difference between the two, so you can always tell. And the hues of the world change to a more dark blue, and it's very striking. It's the thing this game has to offer. And using the lamp, you can also do things like bring their soul basically out of their body and deal damage to it, which instead of doing normal damage, does something called wither. Wither is a very important thing that'll come into my later points of the game, which it does damage in the form of like a whited out health bar that, when you do an actual physical attack against them that doesn't, just a raw physical hit, it'll not only deplete that entire health bar that is missing from this white, but also a little bit of extra melee damage on top of that. So it allows you to, if you give someone wither, do extra damage to them. Same thing, though, applies to you. When you go over into the Umbral world, you sacrifice some of your health to get wither damage instead of your full health, which can be gained back by hitting enemies. So it's not just a complete detriment to you. It can actually prove to be a great boon. Or you can just instantly just go to a death spiral when all of a sudden you get hit and lose a large chunk of wither health. And, now you got to go back and claim your souls. Once again, it's a Souls game, so it does that system as well. Sometimes I'll save that till later. I'll explain the other mechanic because it's not a good thing. The transition over into the world is fun. The combat, it does its job. It plays like those older Souls games. The spells are pretty, unoriginal, but they function for people that want to do more spell-based gameplay. Though it's not as sorcerer heavy as Dark Souls was in the past. It's more. It seems to me to be very supplemental, the magic system in the game. Though you can do those levels of classes like the sorcerers. It seems to be mostly putting effort on you getting melee classes as opposed to magic ones. There is it's told, the story is told somewhat in the form of a FromSoft game, a little bit more direct, but not so direct as, let's say like a Tomb Raider game or something like that. We talked about that earlier, so it's on my brain. So, it's not much to write home about, because whereas Dark Souls is able to, in my opinion, create a very interesting narrative that you gain through exploring the world, which this game does try to do. One of the big ways that Dark Souls did that was through item descriptions, which in this one, you have to either level up your Inferno or Radiance to get greater insight into those things. And so for much of the game, I'm just getting locked, because I'm not putting points into those into that skill tree. I'm a strength build. I just was kind of left out of learning more about the world. and pretty unnecessarily so. You know, there was I still can't think there's any reason to do that. And so for people that maybe like you, Tavin, who criticize FromSoft story for being too complicated, this just adds a completely unnecessary hurdle to even getting that. And I think I'll bring up some more of the good points because, like I said, combat's acceptable. It's not bad. The game is not bad. I should say that. The mixed reviews are very justified because, unfortunately, there's not a lot this game does well beyond that lamp mechanic of going into the other worlds. First of all, I'll point out the difficulty. It strives to be more difficult, as these games tend to do so. And one of the things that I had heard going into it was that it kind of reminds you of the Dark Souls 1, where you're really intent on not losing your souls. Like, it felt a lot more impactful when you lost them as opposed to the newer Elden Rings, Bloodborne's, Dark Souls 3, which in my eyes came a bit easier. This one does do that, but in a bad way. Because the way that the game tries to get there to be difficulty is rather than putting against you these really interesting, diverse, multiple moveset enemies that you face going into area after area, it instead consistently throws the same type of enemies at you over and over and over again. There is a very clear lack of enemy design. There's only like 2 places in the entire game that have really specific enemy types, and they even overload those while you're there, so by the time you leave, you're bored of them. And, the problem is that these enemy varieties aren't even that great. You have, like, these guys who dual-wield axes and, they're whatever. You have dogs, you have fire-breathing dogs. You have, sometimes these former, amazing-looking knights that all look decrepit and skeletonized, which you saw me fighting a little bit when I first started the game, and you said that looks cool. Well, you'll fight a lot of those guys. They come and do them over and over and over again, and they only have like one unique enemy variety in each area that you go to, and that's really just not enough when all the other ones are the same things you've been fighting since the very first level that you go into. And one of the also ways that they do this is they throw gank enemies at you. Basically zombies that just are, there's so many of them, and they're almost around every single corner. They constantly try to do the whole thing that Dark Souls did, which is, you're going around this corner, and they're going to surprise attack you from an angle you didn't expect. But whereas Dark Souls was able to do it in a way where you really never knew when that was going to happen, almost every single turn in this game, every single bit that I go into has that happen with these nothing enemies that go down in 2 hits that just give, small damage to you or crowd around you when you're fighting the more special enemies in the game. And they just come in different flavors. Like there's the poison one that I fought recently, the fire one, and they're just so whatever. And they just load so many of those into you to where that's where the challenge from the game comes from, just getting overloaded by boring, bland enemies than fun, interesting ones, which Dark Souls, especially as it went on, was able to do to great effect, especially in Elden Ring, where there always seemed to be in an area some cool enemy that you can fight that had unique movesets to the ones that they've came from before, while at the same time building upon the ones that they've introduced the entire length of the game. This one chooses to, they choose the enemy varieties that they want, and then they stick with them. They just give you the same thing over and over and over again, and I never, as I said, I would lose souls, and I would really want to get them. I'd be in a situation I'd be like, oh no, I gotta go, through so many hurdles to get them back, but in a very annoying way, because whereas Dark Souls games could do that with you going like, okay, I'm gonna go and fight this guy and kick his ass and take it back. In this one, I'm just like, great, I gotta go through this level again that's linear. The levels are linear with these bland enemies that they keep throwing over and over and over again. So the loop of dying and going and reclaiming your souls is felt more strongly in this game than any Souls game, and not in a good way. In a way that just they do difficulty in the worst possible way. Then you also have things like the bosses, who are just, they're so whatever. To give a sense, one of the first bosses you fight, they did it a lot during the showcases of the game. She has like these golden wings that she spread. She makes like golden clones of herself, and she sends them out across the map to hit at you. And during that fight, I dodged one, and then she sends 2 other ones out at 2 different times later on in that fight, and I ended up getting killed. I go back to this boss fight, and she starts forming up those visages of herself, and I'm like, okay, I gotta dodge them, I gotta get ready. And then I find out that they go in the exact same location every single time. So I got hit by it and died, and I was like, wait, they just stay in easy to dodge areas, because they go on like the opposite end of the map, and they stay on the same like one on the right side, one on the left side, for example, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in the middle. And I go in the middle and I completely avoid them. And it's just like this grand attack that she's doing just goes right past me. And then I'm having to go and engage with her directly, which many of the bosses, it's like it pigeonholes you into how, obviously bosses will be like, okay, here's the moment of time to attack. That's just how these Souls games always have worked, and you take advantage of them. But in this one, it felt like I was way more restricted and didn't have many opportunities to, take risks to go and attack, do high risk, high reward type situations to go in and deal damage to them when otherwise I shouldn't be doing so, like some Souls games would be able to do. And it would just basically feel like I'm hammering nails. Like, okay, I'm hammering this one. I got to stop here. Got to wait for these couple seconds. Hammer them again, and all of this is being done with pretty boring movesets that are incredibly easy to dodge. They're highly, highly choreographed, so they don't even feel like they're engaging with you all that much. And to try and add depth to the combat, it doesn't do what Dark Souls realized they should be doing. Because back in Dark Souls 1 and 2, like I said, the gameplay functions similarly with the weapons. With your hits, you can dual hand them, you roll and whatnot, yada, yada, yada. But at a certain point in Dark Souls 3, they decided, okay, we got to kind of make this more in-depth. And they decided to do weapon arts. And the weapon arts, though in Dark Souls 3 weren't as refined as they would go on to be even more so in Elden Ring, they did a job of making that melee combat more in-depth. In addition to weapons that had different attack properties or attack styles, particularly in regards to boss weapons. In this one, all of the weapons in their category feel the exact same, whether it's a boss weapon or not. And I lost track. What was I talking about?
Weapon arts. And how
weapon arts, yeah.
It doesn't have that.
It doesn't have that. So you get bored of the combat very, very quickly. And, because when your enemy design is lacking, which at least the first two Dark Souls games had, well, the first Dark Souls game definitively had that, though I am a fan of Dark Souls 2 myself, which at least that game gave you more enemy variety than this one. Rather than the same thing over and over again with weapons where after a certain point, with lack of weapon arts or unique attack characteristics, I'm just kind of left with, charging my heavy attack and slamming it down on their head and then going back and dodging. And just, I have no indication, I have no desire or need to do anything beyond that. And so it just makes it a lot more bland than it otherwise could have been. There is a parry system in this game. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. When you have, let's take Sekiro, which had the first From Software parry. That's not true. Let's go to Dark Souls first. You have, you would usually do it with the shield, or maybe your weapon would be able to do it, most likely your shield, to block an attack, knock them off balance, and go in for a strong attack. The concept is generally to time your blocks right when their attack is connecting to you, and it brings down basically their, I guess they're kind of similar to Sekiro, their stamina meter that'll allow them to be, have some kind of visceral attack done on them. And so it kind of, it functions more like Sekiro, where you're having to time those attacks in relation to your hit. But it, first of all, doesn't have a satisfying feel to it. Sekiro has the clang, 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 Lies of P. The other much better Souls game does as well. And it leads to a better result. Whereas this one, it feels like it takes a lot longer. It's unsatisfying to do. And even the visceral attacks themselves just don't seem to be worth it at the end of the day. Like, I'll do them, and I'm like, that's all that effort for just that? It doesn't really seem like it's worth it, especially when you can get you have these eyes that you can find and upgrade them into sockets, which will give you special abilities. One of the first ones you get is one that when you dodge, it does wither damage. Dodge at the right perfect time, perfect dodge. And I found that with just completely nullified any reason to do the parry system, which, like I said, just didn't do its job properly to begin with. It's not satisfying, payoff's not great, and you just have a way better option in the form of dodges, which admittedly did make combat more fun when I found that. But when you have a core mechanic that just doesn't deliver and has no satisfaction to it whatsoever, it's almost like, why did you add that in the first place at all? I had no incentive to do that whatsoever. It was way more interesting to deal wither damage to enemy by dodging them and going in for an attack to do extra damage. Or when the game gave me a heavy weapon, using that to do heavy strikes to stagger them was way more entertaining than just waiting for that one moment where you can do 2 hits and then that's all you can do before you go through long periods of time where you just can't hit them again because they're too busy doing their boring attacks. One other thing that sometimes with the lamp you can do is an enemy will have a parasite in them that prevents them from, when you deal damage to them, they heal very quickly very, but a big chunk of it heals as well until you take out your lamp and basically eradicate by holding down like R1 to remove that parasite to do actual damage to them. I respect them for trying to make the combat interesting in this regard, but it fails in that, where I'm just kind of like it just breaks up the flow of combat. And like I said, they're throwing gank enemies at you. So rather than doing that to get rid of like enemies' parasites, and interacting with them the entire time, you're really just interacting with the mobs that are swarming over you. Which, side point, when you're in Umbral, the land of the dead, that is like those guys that just appear and attack you. It's even worse then. That's how, when they say that they make being in Umbral more difficult, it's really just throwing those whatever enemies at you in even larger groups than they do back when you're in Axiom, the real world. And so I just, it's just a useless mechanic, which unfortunately messes up certain boss fights. So there was one guy that just kept healing, right? And once I realized that, when I hold up the lamp, there's parasites that I have to deactivate so he can't do that healing ability, I was in the mode of, when I'm fighting bosses, I might have to also use the lamp to deal with them. Fast forward to a boss that I fought recently who does an AoE attack that one-shots you. And for a little bit, I was like, okay, I guess I have to use the lamp to get it, to not do this ability, since it's not like it seems to be like its prime thing to make sure that you're dead or you can't beat the boss. And I looked around forever and I couldn't find them, only to find out that I just needed to hide behind cover, which wasn't really made clear at the time. And so I was just like, it just adds an element that causes you to look for, things with your lamp rather than just interacting with the boss as the mechanics are, visible to see. Because you also, unless you hold up a lamp, you don't get any indication that there is a parasite affecting a boss. There will be actually, that's not true. In certain bosses, sometimes it'll tell you, sometimes it won't, which is also the difficulty part. You're just like, is there one here? I don't know.
Yeah, design.
Yeah, exactly. And the things you get in the world while you're traveling just aren't particularly interesting. I'm not getting these things. I'm like, ooh, what cool new thing does this do? Even though it has things like runes, which do special attack properties to your weapons if you input them there. I'm 18 hours in. I haven't found any runes for the weapons that I'm using. The best thing, the coolest thing that I can find in that universe is different colors to your armor, because that's like superfluous at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And those eyeballs, which even then there's only like 2 of them that I found. And it's not very expansive game, and I was pretty thorough, at least I do say so myself, with going in and finding all of these special items. And I don't think that matters entirely, because I found out that I should specify I didn't have really any technical issues, but that's because I had to upgrade my NVIDIA driver each and every single time I wanted to play the game, because I knew from other people it wouldn't work. And when I went into the world, it would be very, very laggy to begin with, until it just kind of righted itself. And, it was very much an annoying thing, especially when I had almost like, in the week I played this game, like 9 updates, a ridiculous amount. I updated a game, went away for 10 minutes, came back, and there was a gigabyte update that I had to do. And I was like, really? Again? I just did this. It was very annoying.
That's funny as hell. Okay, so some of the trieds and trues they get kind of right, but just overall it's just kind of a redundant, inconsistent game design matched with piss poor enemy variety matched with just very linear and uninteresting levels. Is that the gist that I'm getting from you so far?
Yeah, and I mean the levels are like, they look visually appealing, but it is also just kind of a blatant ripoff from like Dark Souls.
Yeah, as I've been watching the B-roll footage here, it looks like a Souls game, and I'll say it looks really pretty. It looks prettier than most Souls games. And like all of the effects and all of the just different visual effects that they have on your attacks and on your spells and on the lamp mechanic all look great, and the enemies visually are very interesting. But if it's all flash and no real substance and it doesn't feel good to play, then yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, and the entire time I was thinking to myself, I want to play Lies of P. It's able to be for some reason a more blatant copy, particularly of like Sekiro and Bloodborne, but find a more unique identity. Like for example, with that great weapon system that game has, this has just no depth to its weapon systems at all, besides just upgrading them as you get random materials across the world, which, like I said, isn't really fun to find in the first place. And I might have missed some stuff because it seems like there was. I was interested in trying to try out dual short swords, and I found one online that I wanted to try out, and I went to the location it was at. It just wasn't there. And so I'm like, I think it just glitched out. There was another character who had like a quest line that was saying, oh, you can. There's this guy who's imprisoned, right, by the armorer, and you can. It said online that when you find this special item that the enslaved guy is trying to not let his master have, and wants to, if you give it, supposedly, if you give him this item instead of her, he frees himself and becomes your armor. I'm assuming killing her, but I couldn't do that at all. It only allowed me to talk to her, and I think I saw a bit like almost I could talk to him, but the option wasn't being brought up. And so here was this, this quest line, which it doesn't seem like there's that many of to begin with, that I just couldn't even interact with at all. And I believe it's because there was a technical issue and the game just failed to work in that instance. And I see that primarily because, like I said, there was a weapon that I just couldn't pick up. It wasn't there. And I'm just curious as to how many other situations like that I missed going throughout this game, which makes those criticisms of technical issues even more glaring, if it is in fact a reason why I just couldn't find certain things in that world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so far, pretty overall, not the most positive review so far. Definitely, since we've behind the scenes implemented our scoring system, you have now crowned the lowest scoring game that we've had so far, which is always unfortunate. Remind me what you said was good about this game.
Oh, so the combat feel is good.
Okay, really, game feel is good.
Yeah, the criticism is with the enemy varieties and the way that difficulty is thrown at you with things coming around the corner, gank squads. Really, like you pointed out, the enemies look cool. And when I first was playing the game, I'm like, okay, we're getting somewhere. But then, like I said, it throws those same things over and over at me. And how cool an enemy looks kind of takes a backseat towards those bits.
Mundane through repetition. Gotcha.
Yeah. And the bosses aren't bad. They're just in the middle of that road directly. So okay. That's why I'm saying this is a fine game, because there are some bad elements to the game, most certainly, which gotcha. Fully justifies someone saying that the game is bad. But the other things are, most of it's just kind of like average or run of the mill. And it, like I said, the game functions well enough. I didn't have that many technical issues, but other people obviously did. So I count myself lucky in that regard. And the lamp thing is cool. Like, implementing that in other games would be a great idea. It just, they need to kind of remove, like I said, the one where you deal with parasites, which, like I said, they affect normal enemies as well, not just bosses. So that can be kind of just an annoying thing to deal with, rather than, once again, interacting with them at face value. But the world looks interesting, once you get into the depths of it, maybe not so much.
So overall, would you recommend this game to Souls players or hardcore Souls players, or like who would you recommend this game to if you would at all?
Souls players. I think they would be able to have the most unique, interesting takes from it. Yeah. As far as people who haven't played Souls games, really, go play those instead of this any day of the week. Honestly, I would recommend even Souls players, though. Even though you could play this game and get something out of it, you're kind of just better off playing some of not only the other games that have come out this year, but replaying Souls games. Like, I played Dark Souls 1 before I played this. I played Dark Souls 2, 3, Elden Ring, Sekiro before this. Or go to other clones better. Lies of P, most notably. Neo 2. Those games certainly do it better.
What was that one at the beginning of the year? Worldcon? Did you play that? Wolong?
Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which, yeah, I didn't hear much about that either. I don't know. I can't speak on.
I heard good things about that one. But
if that's the case, it's probably better than this one.
Okay.
It's there if you want to play these kinds of Souls games, but for anybody else that's not a Souls fan, you're better off, I think, going towards other avenues.
Heard that. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that is our review for what is this one? For Lords of the Fallen. I almost said World Long Fallen Dynasty, and I was like, that's not right. That is your review for Lords of the Fallen. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Make sure you go ahead, like, subscribe, all of that. There will be a cut down TikTok version of this out soon. Until next time, have a great time. And Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye. Have a great time.